Hello, everyone. Welcome to our chat today on Parallel Lives with Amber Baker, Malibu Medium. Before I bring her on and introduce her properly, if you want to let us know where you're tuning in from, I always like to acknowledge the territories. I live, work, play, and have settled on the Coast Salish territories of the Squamish Nation. Before this, I lived on the Musqueam territories, and my ancestry is of York Factory First Nations and Scottish descent. If you know the name of the traditional territories that you live on, feel free to bring that into the chat as a way of honoring and connecting in with the land. If not, just name where you're tuning in from so we can see who we have here with us from Squamish, Wisconsin. Hello, welcome, the land of the Ho Chunk. I love that. Thank you. New Jersey, Penticton Indian Band. Thank you so much. Amazing. So, a bit of context before I not hand it over to Amber, but she's definitely going to be leading us in this conversation today. As some of you may know, I posted a couple weeks ago about desiring to kind of podcast again after a bit of a hiatus and wanting your ideas on the different things that you want me to cover and talk about on the podcast or through Spirit School. And the first comment that came through, and I'm going to read it out exactly, was, would love to learn more about parallel lives, understanding how to work with them for the highest spiritual growth and alignment. Thank you. And as I was reading that, the first person that was coming to my mind was my dear friend Amber, who is also known as the Malibu Medium. I know her as a medium and a channel and a renowned Akashic Record teacher. She is also one of the founding members of the Spirit School Collective, which is where we met and how we met, gosh, almost like 5 years ago now. So, we've managed to keep in touch. We've vacationed together, we retreated together, and we've built a beautiful friendship over these years. So I'm incredibly happy to bring her to the Spirit School space to talk about this topic because this is something that she absolutely loves to talk about. Of course, we're here on Zoom, so we are happy to field any questions and have this be more of a conversation. But Amber, if you want to come on and introduce yourself a little bit, and I know it was important for you to lay some foundational work on this conversation, like around vocabulary and some context. So welcome, Amber. How are you?
Thank you. I'm well, thank you. I'm really happy to be home. Just because the fires, but yeah, no,
Right.
very well. And if my voice is funny, I have had like a little bit of effect from the air quality, but I'm good. So yeah, I wanted to, for me, when we open up the discussion to parallel lives, really for me, what has to be talked about is who we are as multidimensional beings, because to just go into exploring multi or parallel lives, I think that there's like that bigger picture that is that has some more topics that are very powerful knowledge and understanding for us all to kind of grasp when we want to know what our parallel lives are. So yeah, I think I just wanted to start with the understanding maybe of who we are as multidimensional beings. And I think I know a lot of you here, and I know all of us are light workers, so I'm sure a lot of you know the information that I want to share. But I just wanted to back up and give kind of the bigger picture before we get into just that one aspect of parallel lives, if that is okay.
100%.
Okay.
Yes.
So, I will say that again, I'm definitely feeling the nerves because I want to share everything that I know. And yet I know that in this small time together, that would be impossible because to talk about who we are as multidimensional beings would be to talk about, I think, the biggest questions that we have about the very nature of life, right? And so I'll just, like I said, I'll share to the best of my abilities. And I will say that my understanding stems from the channeling that I have done. And so when I'm pulling my my own interpretation of my own channeling, I'm still trying to understand it from my human lens. So I think that I will evolve just like all of you will evolve with how we understand these truths that I want to talk about. So I think that like I said, who we are as multidimensional beings and the journey of discovering that can definitely change our life. And so I want to share like two perspectives and kind of charts, but I don't have any visuals. So hopefully you guys can kind of follow along with your own mind's eye while I talk about these two charts, because I think that maybe both of them will, one of the ways that I'll describe them might be your preference than the other. So there's kind of two schools of thought, right? The first one is from my channeling. So I have this book, have not published it yet, gonna be publishing it, but this is the the understanding directly from my own channeling is that we are conscious, intelligent beings stemming from source, our acting out our soul's expressions through different dimensions, realities, and universes. So in this understanding, if you imagine in the center a ball of light, and that ball of light is source, and we source gives birth and creates souls. Okay, so a soul is a intelligent consciousness. Okay, and it is also my understanding that source in its entirety, which is all that ever that exists and ever will exist, is a consciousness, is the one universal mind or the one conscious mind. So this is the ball of light I'm talking about, source. And from this expression, or from all that has ever existed, source has birthed these souls, which is who we all are, right? And we are emanating as streams of consciousness, streams of intelligent consciousness from this center. And as we emanate the experience of ourselves as individual streams of consciousness, we are passing through different realities, dimensions, and universes. So we're experiencing ourselves in these different expressions, in these different realities, universes, dimensions. And we are experiencing ourselves at the same time. So we're experiencing ourselves in these different, like I said, realities, universes, and dimensions, separate but simultaneous at the same time. So there is the purpose of having the veil when we are, let's say, living an incarnation in this human school. We are born forgetting, as we all kind of probably feel, right? We're kind of born forgetting, and then we have to kind of wake up to who we are. And that very act of waking up is what they call remembering. So our evolution is remembering who we are, and the veil that kind of orients ourselves in the here and now is purposeful because it helps us focus on the lessons that we're going to go through, and it helps us focus on our current life so that we can do the work, so that we, anytime we remember who we are and vibrate from that level of interconnectedness with source, we are evolving. So I will say that it's purposeful to live in the here and now in this lifetime, and at the same time understand that we are experiencing parallel lives, that our soul is is only experiencing this human life as one part or one aspect. It is only one expression of who we are in our entirety. So our soul is so vast. And when the reason why I want to talk about this multidimensional understanding of who we are, not just understanding, but embodiment, I should say, of understanding the vastness of who we are. Um, I believe it relieves a lot of pressure that we can feel that we have to fulfill our mission in one lifetime, and that we only have this one lifetime and we better make, the best of it. And the truth is that because we stem from source and source exists in eternity, so do we. And so we are evolving in eternity, experiencing different aspects of or I should say, experiencing ourself in these different realities, dimensions, time, space, right? So for me, like I said, I think that when I had my spiritual awakening, and a lot of you know my story, I had a near-death experience, and my consciousness merged with source in that near-death experience. And so I had this rapid um, merging of all my soul aspects. And so what happens is when the different experiences that we have as a soul in all these different realities and dimensions merge with source, we experience we evolve. That's how we evolve. But when all the different soul aspects or soul bodies that we're experiencing across planets, time, dimension, space merge with source, that's how we experience enlightenment. And so I think I'll say, okay, so this is one understanding this chart, if you can kind of imagine a ball of light, and then we are these individual streams of consciousness passing through the realities and dimensions and universes. The other chart, or kind of like diagram, is if you imagine kind of source at the top, and that is that I am presence that we're stemming from. And then the expression of source is our higher self. And it is my understanding that our higher self, that we all have one higher self. So it really is that we all are one. We're all a reflection of each other. I am you, you are me. So we come from the one universal source consciousness, cosmic consciousness, and then the expression of that, I should say, I don't know how to say it, that law or that anchor is our higher self. And that's at the top of the model of this diagram. And then from there, birthed from the expression of source, from like the emanation of consciousness itself, which is all that exists, comes these 12 rays of light, which I'm sure is a gross underestimation of the reverberations of these frequencies that source is emanating, right, in eternity. But if we can kind of just, I think, it's easier to understand it as 12 rays of light, just like we talk about 12 dimensions. I'm sure there's much more. But if we can imagine from the higher self of the one universal mind comes these 12 rays of light. These rays of light are represented in colors like the rainbow. And these rays of light hold within them unique characteristics, unique abilities, unique expressions, but they are still part of that one whole source. And so from these rays of light is birthed oversouls. So these oversouls are the purest form of the frequency of source, right? And from these 12 oversouls then is subdivided a soul group or a soul family. And so we, as individual souls, we all come from a oversoul, which is our own unique ray of light from source. So a lot of us are light workers and come from the violet ray. And the light workers, all of us, we share the same oversoul. And then within that oversoul is birthed, or you could say is an extension, again, of a soul group. So our soul group as light workers is coming from the violet ray. And then our soul group, how we are all interconnected from the soul group is birthed or emanating our individual souls who are then carrying out the mission of that light ray. And so if you really think about it, of course, we know, we hear we are all one, but we really are all interconnected. And I believe that we all have a unique mission within the light ray that we serve, or that we actually are emanating from, to serve the expansion of source. And I believe that the here and now in planet Earth, that one aspect of all of our souls as light workers, because we're in Danielle's community, I just believe that we are all part of this soul group that are light workers, are here to co-create the new earth, which is to embody a higher level of consciousness and anchor it down into this 3D reality. And so, if you want to talk about parallel lives, we as souls, because we know that we are not just, it is not all of us, that all parts of our soul that are only expressing our intelligent consciousness on planet Earth, that we can be in between planets, we can be on other planets, and we can be in other universes. But I believe that we're still serving our our unique expression of the source frequency that we come from to evolve, right? To evolve, to expand source and to bring, what is the definition of a light worker? I mean, we're going to serve it in different ways, but that's what we're doing as souls across all time and space dimensions, realities, and universes. And if we want to access, parts of ourself that are living parallel lives. I think we already are. I think that we can do it through the Akashic Records, or we can just really do it through the expansion of our consciousness. We can do it through tapping into our higher self, because anytime we tap into our higher self, we're tapping into the entirety of who we are on that soul level. And so it's kind of like the healing the shadow, the the integration of wholeness is how we tap into that who we are as multidimensional beings. And I think we can make it as complicated or simple as we want it to be. I think sometimes, the understanding of the chart of a multidimensional being, from the soul to the higher self to the oversoul to the soul to the other soul extension, can be like, yeah, no, I can't grasp that. So I think sometimes for me, it's just easier for me to understand that I am an individual stream of intelligent consciousness, a divine spark emanating from the one source, right? And I am passing through these realities and dimensions. And as I do that, I'm given the gift of remembering who I am over and over and over again. And every time I remember who I am and I vibrate within my source essence, I'm evolving myself. You're evolving yourself, you're evolving humanity. And then we're all doing it together, because ultimately, yes, we are individual souls, but like that pyramid kind of scale that I talked about, we really are all one. And I'll just say one more thing before I'm talking too much. I think that also, because we are so sensitive as light workers, when we really embody the oneness within, we will be able to heal the fear and the self-doubt and the insecurities that are stopping us from serving our missions, because of the sensitivity that we usually operate in. We stop ourselves from sharing our light or living in that light a lot of the times. And so I think, forgetting for a second about just parallel lives, if we could just go back to understanding who we are as multidimensional beings, and that our souls are interconnected, and we're all serving one mission, which is to expand the light of source, right? The light in love. Then we can relinquish the fears and the insecurities that makes us feel separate from each other as sisters. From, I say sisters in a way meaning that we really are one. And we can hopefully, like, it is hopefully, what I hope you take away from this talk today, I guess I should say, is that feeling, not just an understanding, but an actual feeling in your heart that we are all one. And so we can move forward with our light, and we can share and express who we are. Um, and the parallel lives, because everything is happening at once, even our past lives are really not really a past life, it's a parallel life, because it is all happening at once. And so anytime you want to really go into a parallel or a past life, I would say I would say absolutely, you can have your regression, you can do QHHT, you can do Akashic Records reading, but it's going to be the most purposeful when you explore those lifetimes with the relevance to where you're focused with your mission and where you're focused with your soul's evolution, again, in the here and now. Because everything is based in the here and now, meaning this lifetime, there is like such a purpose that we do kind of have that veil of separation where our soul does want us to do the work in the here and now, if that makes sense.
Okay, deep breath in for
Deep
me.
breath.
I'm
Yeah,
saying it
deep
for
breath
me and
for
everyone
me.
else because that's a lot. And I have to say, like, I wouldn't have been able to follow this 4 years ago, but I'm so proud of myself because I'm like, I really am grasping this because we have different languages for things, but I really am starting to understand this concept around the parallel lives. Thank you. That was so much wisdom. Before I interject with some thoughts that were coming through my mind, does anyone here have any questions, feedback for Amber? Because she just dropped a lot of soul truths on us. A lot of soul truths. So I want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to share something that came up for them if something did with what Amber said. Is every okay? Mary Beth says here. Okay, Mandy, and then I'll go to Mary Beth. Do you want to unmute Mandy?
Sorry. I'm just off camera today because I'm anything but presentable. So I'll just just two quick questions, Amber. I love the way you present and I love this information and I really, really appreciate you coming on today, first and foremost. Um, with the concept of all of these parallel lives occurring at the same time, with the context of like going back into previous lives and this and that. Like I've gone back and done previous like past life regression or previous lives. How would you explain seeing my death in those previous lives if the theory is that they are occurring all at the same time? That's my first
Oh,
question.
okay, so it's the context from which you're viewing it, right? So it's non-linear, but there's like a frame or a context that you're observing it in. Does that make sense?
Okay. Okay. Um, yes, it makes sense, but I just have to chew on that for a little while and to kind
Yeah.
of process and absorb it. So thank you for that. The second question I had is, why is there a forgetting or some sort of amnesia, or why do we have this forgetting, in your opinion, with the parallel lives? Because wouldn't it be beneficial if all of our soul lifetimes kind of work together to get all of our missions done and merge? Do you know what I mean? Like, is there a reason from your viewpoint as to why we have this forgetting of these parallel lives occurring at the same time?
I guess I know I said forgetting, but I think that at the same time I think that we are born actually remembering. I'm sure a lot of you have had like experiences where when you're younger, you are remembering more. So it's not necessarily totally forgetting, but there is, like I said, the veil that orients us into the here and now. It's almost like if you can imagine it is in our best use to focus on the lessons and the work at hand in this current lifetime. So, if we were remembering everything and living in that full remembrance, sometimes I believe that that's what happens when someone is schizophrenic or kind of goes down like a certain
Mhm,
path within their own mental health.
mhm,
So, I think that we're never disconnected, right, from who we are and our truth. And that's the remembering part. Like we're born kind of knowing ourselves when we're younger, right? Like, don't you guys, like for me, it was like I was born knowing myself as an artist. That has been obviously for me part of like my soul's journeys
mhm,
that I've always experienced this kind of sense of love for beauty and art. And this has been with my soul group, and my whole family is all connected to the world of art. So you do know yourself, right? You are born, you're not totally forgetting. You're born with your natural gifts and abilities, but I guess the veil and the forgetting in totality would be to help you focus on the here and now so that you can, like I said, learn and grow from the experiences because our soul did choose this earthly incarnation as a vehicle, right, for our evolution. And the vehicle is those soul lessons that we're experiencing with our soul families. And so, yeah, does that, Mandy, does that explain it? And
Yeah, it absolutely does.
this is my only understanding. I have to say, I'm sharing everything that I know and that I'm channeling, but I know that a lot of you will also have insights into this, but this is my understanding.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
really great explaining, Amber. Very great explaining. You really are explaining it very well. Like somebody else said, and I agree, Haley says, my heart understood, but my brain is catching up. 1000%, because we like to make sense of things as they make sense. I have a similar question to Mary Beth. And I don't know why, and I guess I'm going to follow up with a question as well, but is every lifetime happening now or are some in parallel? And I give a bit of context to this. Like I was shown a vision years ago that me and my son shared a life as brothers. And then now we have like this existence where I'm his mom and he's my son. And it almost makes me sad with this awareness that I will die one day and I will not have this like lived experience with him, even if I go on to another one. And I'm sure I've had some in the past that I would have been thinking and feeling the same. Like, why does it happen all at once? And why does it spark this almost like spiritual melancholy?
So it's hard for me too, of course, to understand that grasp of no, there's no such thing as time and it's all happening simultaneously. Um, so I will say that yes, it is happening at the same time when you view a past life. The power in that is the healing that can take place when you access a past life and you look at it and your consciousness is merged with the consciousness of who you are being and expressing yourself in that past life. And then you shift your perspective by observing it. It is healing, and I'm going to say in quotation marks, that past life version of yourself. But again, it's it's not that it's a past life. It's just that you're accessing it in your awareness. So your awareness is your consciousness. And remember, like the understanding of consciousness is kind of key in all of this because source is consciousness, we are consciousness. We are one part of a whole of that consciousness, that one universal mind. Okay. So in our consciousness, our consciousness is infinite and it's experiencing all these probabilities and possibilities and timelines and realities because we can't help but expand in the very nature of like who we are. So I hope this is helping you, Danielle. It's like we in that expansion is happening for eternity and it's happening in the now. But the context in which we view and observe the past life is in that linear motion because maybe it's because that's the 3D reality that we are anchored in Earth, right? So it's an illusion. Um, but and that's okay. Like if we need to understand it as a past life to kind of understand it, that's okay. And that's how I understand it too. Um, but it is happening now. And that sorrow that you feel for like, I don't want to lose. And I have the same thing with my kids, no matter what, that I exist in eternity and our souls never die and that we're never disconnected from our loved ones, in spirit. Of course, we have the physical longing for that life and the expression that we're living right now. But I guess that's also anchored in a 3D reality where we are experiencing duality and separation, right?
Yeah.
And so I guess just having grace for ourselves and just saying, yeah, we're gonna feel sad, we're gonna feel that longing, but when you pass or when you're there is a part of your soul that is experiencing higher consciousness that probably doesn't have the bound in time and space, that feels that sadness around losing your son and the relationship you have now.
Yeah.
I hope that makes
And I'm
sense.
sure when we're there, our perspective is like, ain't no thing, right? But here, because we have that
Yeah.
attachment to like this love that is tangible, I can touch you. It's like, I can imagine that that has something to do with it. I suppose, Mary Beth has a follow-up here too. So technically, we shouldn't say past lives, and we should say lives happening simultaneously,
Past lives
right?
or parallel lives. Yeah.
Parallel lives. In
But
hypnotherapy, we also use alternate life. So there's lives in between life spaces. Interesting. Yeah.
yeah, so I will say that the last QHHT session I did, I asked the question that we all kind of want to ask, right? Like, where am I really from? Which now that I understand, I don't want to put myself down, but it's kind of a funny, silly question because we're not really from anywhere. The only place we're from is source, but again, we're experiencing ourselves, you know, across time, space, dimension. So QHHT is
Dolores Cannon.
quantum, I don't know right now.
Yeah.
But okay, so you do in a QHHT session, you access your higher self. And my higher self told me that I am a guide to other planets and that I exist in councils and I sit on a council. Um, so it's like this would be the beauty and kind of exploring who we are past this earthly incarnation and knowing that all parts of our soul are not expressing ourselves solely from here. So when you really start to explore who you are in these other kind of realities, planes of consciousness, it's fascinating and it can help you um, understand yourself and understand your experiences and maybe understand your purpose on that larger scale. Like it makes me understand myself on that larger scale. So again, it's not just about parallel lives, it's about, again, who you are in your entirety. So, like, you might explore who you are in this other um dimension and it's not even a lifetime, right? Like if I'm a guide and I was told I was a guide in between planets, I'm not really necessarily always existing in a physical body in a life. I'm kind of in between, in that in between space, and that's happening at the same time as
Yeah.
well.
Okay. I love this. Great things coming up in the chat. Let me just ask one clarifying thing. So, when I die, and that day will come in this life, does that mean I'm kind of doing it again? Or like, is, this timeline that I'm on right now does have its end in this 3D time and space, right? My bones will eventually, I don't know, maybe they'll be found because I don't think bones actually rot, but my flesh will and my blood will. So what happens to this timeline? Do I just continue on it and just kind of like move through it continuously, or does it like have a finite ending?
Okay, so yes, your physical body, will die,
Yeah.
and your soul, your consciousness is the continuation in eternity that will continue to collect experiences that will never die and will never be lost, right? So this is the recording of your soul's consciousness. This is what's in the Akashic Records. It is the recording of all your experiences. So the Danielle in this lifetime will just be a chapter, right, in your book of life. It will never be lost. Everything you've learned here will impact that continuation of where you're going to and where you have been. Um, does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I don't mean to dumb down the conversation over here either because
Oh,
we got some really good questions here in the chat. I'm going to go and I'm just going to throw it out there. I was going to show it as part of this thing, but I don't think I'm going to. I'm going to post it as the replay. But has anyone seen the movie Interstellar? Just drop me an emoji if you have. Okay, there was a scene. I heard about multiple dimensions and realities before, couldn't quite grasp it. And then I saw this movie, Interstellar, and it kind of blew my mind because there's a scene in it. It's about 5 minutes long. I found it on YouTube. I'll post it as part of the replay. But he literally is in this like middle dimensional space where he sees the timeline with his kid when she was like 9, and then the timeline with his kid, and he was trying to war, and then it kind of like merges all together, and she has like this knowing. I'm getting chills just thinking about this scene, and I think it's a good visual representation of what it might be like to go through the dimensions. I don't know, it's a bit dramatic too because it's a movie, but I'm going, yeah, the explain the parallel lives.
Okay, but
Should
can
I
I just,
play it because it's 5 minutes? I would love
well,
your
let me just,
response.
can I touch on that though for one second, what you just talked about?
Yeah.
So what I've channeled is you can be outside of time. So which is the quantum realm. So all probabilities exist, and the Akashic Records kind of is that space where you can view those probable timelines, and it's time itself. It's you're not in time. When you're in that space, you're in the quantum realm. Does that help you understand that, or
Yeah,
does
it
that make
does. It does. It's just obviously like we forget sometimes, or we have that amnesia somebody described earlier, because with our brains, how they are in this existence, it's probably harder for some of us to kind of get there. But yes, it does make sense to me. And like I say earlier, it's like my heart gets it and my mind's trying to do its thing, like the ancient part and the new part. Um, I love the idea of all lives happening at once. I also wanted to talk a little bit about soul groups because I mean, I always talk about this book, but it was just so foundational for me about the afterlife of Billy Fingers. And near the end of the book, as he transcends through the different realms of the heavens, if you will, there is a scene where there's a parade of souls. And I believe there were 12, and there was these like bridges, and they would follow their, what did you call them? Like you talked about different layers, like we're following like this light, or it's like a leader of the light, if you will. There's a scene that kind of describes what you were saying, which is kind of like coming to the front of my mind as well. But he mentioned it like that. It's like we're part of a soul group that expands beyond our family, even. Like we have our blood family, which I do believe our blood family, the people we choose to incarnate with in these dynamics, more or less kind of stay the same. But I have a hard time even accepting that now. Like,
I know. Well,
is our cohort here on Earth, because we think of an earthly cohort, we think about everyone around the world right now. We all chose to come in during this time and play our roles. Like, are we all a soul family? Because we're a cohort, right? Like, what do you think?
I think that it could be that the soul groups and the soul families are separate. I'm kind of toying with that. I don't know the answer for sure. I feel that our soul group is the mission based, is us sharing the same mission, and the soul group is the one that is stemming from our oversoul, which is our unique expression of source, that ray of light. And so that oversoul, which is that unique frequency of source, we share the same unique abilities and characteristics that serve a specific mission. And so, like I said, I talked about kind of the light workers being of that violet ray, but then the soul family is most likely another kind of extension, a collective consciousness of souls that have agreed to serve different roles in different incarnations to teach each other the lessons that we're going to want to learn to to obtain our highest, to reach our highest potential, right? To evolve,
Right.
right? So our soul families like are usually some friends, some family, and not just, the five people that we might have in this family, but they extend, in a larger field as a collective consciousness. So it includes karmic relationships, it includes twin flames, soulmates, and that would be maybe the soul family. So that group of people are sometimes the people you dislike the most. They're the ones in this lifetime that are serving a role that is a karmic role, but it's actually done in love. So if you take, for example, me and my brother haven't spoken for 7 years, and on this earthly life, we have this horrible relationship and he treats me horrible. And then my human self would say he's a horrible person. But I actually had a experience in your retreat actually a couple of years ago where I met his higher self and he came to me down this river floating on a canoe, looking himself, but an older version, and poured unconditional love to me. And he told me that he is here to teach me unconditional love, and I am here to teach him unconditional love. So on the human lens, we're experiencing pain and suffering, and we're playing out the karmic roles to actually, though, it's done in love, and we're teaching each other unconditional love. So the people that sometimes hurt you the most are actually, you have agreed with them for both of you guys to serve a role. Now, it doesn't, that's a very big conversation. Like, it doesn't mean that you take on that suffering and you become a victim. Like, that's a whole other conversation. But sometimes that does happen.
Yeah. That's a really great way to
We went off on
describe
a
it.
tangent, I think.
No, no, no. I appreciate you sharing that story because I remember that I was thinking about that when you were talking about the experience you had at the retreat. And I know that was really healing as well. And it kind of ties in, Anya was asking about, can you speak to a little bit about the concept of soul growth or karma linear as they relate to parallel realities? You know, I think you just touched on that a lot naturally, but if there's anything else you want to add to that as well. Um, and then I also kind of wanted to say too, as a follow-up, when I look at the people who play those challenging roles, I can see because I've had that, because I have spiritual perspective, right? Not always, but I can usually get to a place of spiritual perspective. I could see the role of a teacher they have played for all of us who were part of that experience with them, right? But on karma, yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's
So what is the question?
the question exactly is, can you speak a little to the concept of soul growth or karma in a linear way, as they relate to parallel reality? So, as an, maybe because, yeah, about karma and the teachings
Okay.
from that.
I'm going to try to understand. Maybe you can help me explain it. Whoever asked the question, I don't think I understand the question. Sorry.
Hey.
Anya, do you want to unmute, love? There you go. Perfect.
Yeah, sure. So I'll show you my face too, just so it helps a little bit. So basically, yeah, so what I'm wondering is if everything is occurring concurrently, how does the concept of our soul growth, like learning things that happen as what we call past lives, how does that connect when you perceive of it as something that's happening concurrently? Because we learn, I think as light workers, we can all agree that we're here not only on a mission to serve, but also to progress our own souls and our learnings, and then hopefully share that with other people around us. How does that happen concurrently? Does that sort of help to
Kind of.
explain
Okay.
it a little bit better?
Concurrently, I'm not very familiar with that word. Do you mean at the same time? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
okay,
exactly.
so
Yeah.
my brain is not fully understanding the question, but how does it happen? Can you just say it in another way? I'm just having trouble understanding.
Yeah, so basically, in growth, I guess, in the way that we perceive of it, it has to occur in a linear sense, right? So you have an experience, you learn from that experience that plays into your growth as a soul. And, for those of us like myself who believe in karma, it'll also, facilitate the whole process of how you re-enter the world in your next reincarnation. So if everything is happening concurrently, uh, how can you explain that? Do you know what I mean? Because one concept is linear, the other one is timeless.
I think you're just describing two different understandings, right? So you can't understand the linear concept from a non-linear place. So it's kind of like that's the way that I think that's why I'm confused. I think that if you can like let go for a second, like the normal um knowledge that we have around everything being linear, it's like we have to kind of allow ourselves to let that go for a second and also think in a non-linear way, which is a multidimensional way. So it's not happening linear, but again, it's the context in which we view it, um, that can make it feel like it's happening linear. So if we view it with like a different lens, if we view it from a multidimensional lens, I think that's the only way I can explain the question. We have to view it from a different lens to understand it in a different lens or in a different experience. So yes, your soul is learning the lessons, right? And so that is very true. But again, it's not happening, okay, I learned this lesson and I've reached this level of consciousness in this lifetime, and now I'm going to pass through another plane of consciousness. It's happening in this multidimensional way. So one aspect of you is experiencing that one expression that has learned that one lesson, but another aspect of your soul could be operating at a higher dimension and whatever, or a lower dimension, which is not bad or good. And it's when whatever part of you that has conscious intelligence is vibrating in source, that's when you evolve. So when all aspects of your soul that are experiencing conscious intelligence, wherever it is, experience conscious intelligence, no matter what universe or reality, vibrates with source. And if it happens at the same time, if you merge into the alignment with your divine presence or your remembrance of source, if you merge, that's when you reach enlightenment. So I think that we have to kind of think like that. Like you have this expression of yourself that is experiencing this one little moment in time, which we call a lifetime. And then you have another experience of yourself. That's another stream, aspect of your consciousness that's also evolving in another reality. And it's all happening at the same time, like this, right? Like we're emanating from that source, and we're just passing through and evolving into different planes of consciousness. And maybe it's happening like some experiences are happening where you're more aligned with source and other ones you're not. But I don't know if this helps explain it, but I'm hoping to illustrate again how we learn in a more multidimensional way, where it's not just about that one lifetime and then we pass. It's actually so many different parts of you that are experiencing yourself in different expressions.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that answer. And it does make sense. Like you can't, sort of put the constructs of like what you're experiencing here to be able to understand that concept unless you deviate from your original way of thinking. And it's so interesting. I remember when I was really young, I had a very close relationship with my father. And I remember I asked him when I was like probably like 8 or 9 years old, like, what happens, after we die? And, like everything sort of has a beginning and an end, because he really believed in, like it doesn't just end when you die. Like, and I said, well, how can that be? And he said, well, as people, we don't actually have the ability to understand the concept of something that's infinite, right? And he's like, there exists things that don't have a concrete beginning and an end. And that's one of the things that as like humans, we have a hard time wrapping our mind around that concept. And I think that kind of ties into what you're saying as well.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I will just say that with all of that being said, with what I just said or shared, I believe that as a soul in that continuation of evolution that we're experiencing in eternity, that because we're here in Danielle's community, that we are part of a highly evolved collective consciousness, right? That we could call light workers. And so most likely the different aspects of our soul that are expressing ourselves in different dimensions and realities are operating in higher consciousness, right? And because we've kind of come here as trailblazers to co-create and to ascend, to help Earth ascend into the 5D reality or unity consciousness, a lot of times we're placed in soul families. Unlike your father, who seemed very wise, we're placed in soul families to act as teachers or to act as like the person that might be that the spark, like a new way of being. So I think that this is just my feeling that we have the soul group that we come to, that's like the shared consciousness that we're operating in as a whole on that soul level. And then we have the soul family where, I'm sure some of our soul family and a lot of them might be kind of at the similar wavelength, but not always. Sometimes we are placed here, and even on earth, we're placed here in this like unique kind of time where we have to be the leaders and we have to show people how to embody a new way of being. And it's very difficult, as I'm sure all of you feel. And I've been feeling for myself more and more and more and more. It's like going against the grain to even think of ourselves as nonlinear, which means that we're not going to measure ourselves as successful beings or not successful beings, and like the constant measuring. Um, I don't know, I'm rambling, but I just think that we have a big responsibility and mission to really show up in completely different ways. And most of the times we are probably looked at as like completely off the wall, because right now at this time, it is like this rebirth, I think. And so I'll just say that, like, and I don't know what that's going to spark in the conversation. I don't know where we're at in time. And I don't mean to make it sound negative either, but I guess I'm just happy to be with people that I'm sure are like leading this new way of being together. Do you know what I mean, Danielle?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I mean, it's timely. I have to ask about deja vu before we log off today too. And thank you,
Oh,
Anya,
I
for
have a
bringing that.
definition for that.
Yeah, I was going to say, what does your book say about deja vu?
Can
Because I
I
can't help
can
but
I
think
look it
it's
up?
like timelines intersecting in some way. No one has an explanation for deja vu in the science.
So, well, it is timelines intersecting. If you give me 1 second, if somebody, here. Okay. So you can have a soul that has many parts or realities not in sync, and then that another soul that is as a collective operating on more levels with source. And then you would say that soul is more evolved. And other people would say, aren't they wise or know many truths? When you have a deja vu, it is because your soul is doing the same thing in another reality. It is merged for a moment, or you know source. Oh, I'm sorry, or you know someone because you know them in another reality. That's
I
a very actually simple way of understanding it. Do you feel that? Do you feel the truth in that?
Up until this morning, okay, literally up until this morning, and this is how come I always preach on don't hold your beliefs as truth, because your beliefs will change and evolve as you change and evolve. If you had asked me yesterday, I would have said that the definition of deja vu would have been what Celia Brown said in the 90s, a little bit of a marker that you're on the right path, right? So I was like, I'll take that. That sounds great. But this morning I was sitting with it, and I don't know why deja vu and dream state, like, are we doing work in other parallel universes when we're in our dream state? And what is that why we wake up with such an understanding of things that, they say it's like integration time while we sleep. But I think we're messing around in parallel universes. But today I woke up with this thought that deja vu was an intersection of our lives.
That's what
But
it
you
said.
brought that to a deeper level here, where it's like you're doing a similar thing or with a similar person or the same person in an alternate experience. That actually gives me crown shivers. Yeah, and Christy's saying here too. So deja vu was a really big one. Thank you for bringing that in. And I know we're coming up on our time, but I think too, one other thing that I found really interesting was the violet rays and the 12 rays. I want to know so much more about that. That's the first time I've ever heard you talk about that, me personally. And it reminds me of, I've heard the terminology around the violet flame. I'm not sure if they're the same thing or not. And then one thing I had a hard time reconciling until you and Anya were talking about was like, I have a hard time, like I can understand my husband Nick being part of my soul group, but being part of the Violet, like I don't want to judge him. He would
Right.
say very much the same thing, you know what I mean? The last thing I would really call like him is like a light worker, and not because I don't judge him, he just doesn't have an interest in anything like this. And it's like, you know what I mean? But that's me being super judgy.
Well, I mean, or an observation. there's discernment. So yeah, but
He's not spirit school
like I
material.
yeah, so but what's your is that just a statement or is that a question? I didn't
No, I
know.
think just hearing you talk about the distinctions, and I know in our human experience we like to put things in neat and tiny buckets, and it's not necessarily that. It's like it's interwoven. But I think the distinction between the soul groups, like the soul families, was really helpful for me with that because I think about our missions here, and I can see very clearly Nick's mission is not to be and share the light. Like, that's just not his mission. But he has such other qualities that help the human experience, that help my children, that help our family function, that feels like it's as important, but it's a completely, it comes from a different place and it's for a different experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you're right. It's not better or worse. It's a different he embodies a different expression of source,
Yeah.
a unique quality and characteristic. Um and what I was told or channeled was like with the light rays that we emanate from, which I believe light workers, I'll say light workers, I believe, emanate from the violet ray, but it doesn't mean that there isn't specific soul groups within light workers that are serving like maybe a more specific mission, right? Um, but the it's easy to think of the light rays as the color of the rainbows. And so every color represents a unique ability, right? And a mission that it serves. Um, People have different interpretations of what those colors represent and different like gods and goddesses and divine beings that kind of embody them. Um, I have been playing around channeling with like what they are, but ultimately, when I channel from the masters of the Akashic Records, they do say that they are very much left up to interpretation because it's kind of like saying, okay, Danielle, describe yourself. And you might say, I am bubbly, I am loving, I am this, I am that. And then we might ask your daughter, and she would say, my mom is this and that, but they're both true. So it's like, I don't want people to get too caught up with like, what kind of person am I in my light ray? It's like, the vibration that you are. And so it's the more you know yourself, the more you merge with your higher self, you just are that light ray. You'll never get away with it and you'll always know who you are. And it's just about again, yeah, you can't get away from that expression. And Nick is his own expression. And so is everybody else. But some of us do vibrate on the same wavelength or on the same, light ray. And we then, because of that, we share a more similar frequency and we're like-minded souls, right? And so we just vibe with each other and we're exactly what you said, passionate about similar things. But we need the other people. We need the red and the orange and the yellow light rays. We need the people who are interested in politics and govern the government, which I am zero,
No.
to kind of be all part of the evolution of the planet.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. And please, I'm not trying to shit on my husband.
No, and I know
I would
you're not.
happily show this to him and he'd be like, yeah, no, he's like,
Yeah.
I'm
And
partly
like,
like
don't we all
earth.
wish we could be like him sometimes? Like he does bring amazing things and it's never in judgment of what light ray you exist in, but I really do love the violet light ray. I mean, I do think
Yeah.
it's
Me too. I resonate with it. I mean, all the purple line was right around me, but I was also thinking about like there's a this term that people really love, and I know we got to wrap up here in about 2 minutes. Amber has an appointment, but this whole concept of like old souls or people who I know, and like what are we trying to say? Like in this timeline, I express myself more of a higher consciousness than I'm
yeah,
sure another timeline where I'm probably have low consciousness or no consciousness. And even Nick could end up being Jesus in another timeline or something. Like,
yeah,
who
right.
knows, right?
You never know. I Part of me feels like as a whole, our soul has a plane of consciousness that we kind of fluctuate between like around the same. But of course, it could behoove us and be in our highest potential to experience the lowest lower vibrational consciousness so that we can like rise even more and expand even more. And that's what some people say that duality is, right? Like every time we go from our shadow to our light, we expand our consciousness so much more. So I don't know. There's also just the mystery of life that's okay. And I don't want us ever to like feel like we have to know all the answers, you know? It's just like in the most simplest, beautiful form, we are a soul, expansive, like evolving across all time, dimension, reality, space, whatever you want to call it, for eternity. And we're all interconnected and we're ultimately all one. And it's just, and we will never die. Our consciousness will never die, but source does birth, create souls all the time and universes all the time.
Yeah.
So maybe that's kind of new, but
I love it, and I can't wait for your book. I know it's something that you're very passionate about, and I'm so happy you had deja vu there on the table. This has been
I just turned to that page, which is really good.
I love that. And I love too that what we're doing in the collective, which you also are listening to, something like the telepathy tapes, where the whole conversation around consciousness is really starting to seep into more communities. More people are awakening to this language and to like this way of being. So I really feel like a lot of us are meant to like really get this now and like really start expressing ourselves in these ways for like this new earth, like you say, which I've never read that book. I don't know if I will, but I love that term and I love the whole thought around like we definitely need a bit of a new way of being here, don't we? It's time.
Yeah, and I will say, like, I always teach this, and I truly believe it. Like, telepathy is the universal language. It's what we will go back to. It's the only language that there is, right? Like, our soul, our spirit communicates telepathically
Yeah.
in other dimensions. And the shared conscious experience of that telepathy tapes that they talk about with the children or the kids or is is the same shared consciousness that we experience when we do a psychic reading or communicate with spirit. And to me, it's so obvious. It's such old news, but I'm like, okay, I'm happy that they're doing that scientific research data to kind of prove it to the world. But it's also more fascinating that it's happening in the autistic community. But yeah, I just feel like th- because we're all one, we're always experiencing shared consciousness. And I think that's like amazing.
Me too. My first ever development journal, page one, the first thing I wrote down, which was inspired, was transfer of thought. And I didn't really fully understand that for years in my mediumship until I really experienced that like transfer, and transfer of energies, transfer of thought, transfer of empathy, transfer of consciousness, if you will, right? That shared consciousness. It's just so powerful. And I think it brings a really profound language to the table as well. So super happy it's out and we're all listening. So thank you, Amber. You got some great comments here. People were just resonating with everything that you were saying. So appreciative of it. You can see it kind of come up in the chat and I can send you the chat if you want after. But thank you everyone for coming. And I feel like this is probably just going to be the first conversation that we'll probably have. People will have more questions after this. So if you do, pop them below. We'll definitely have Amber come back for like another conversation on this topic. So nourishing. If you're in the collective, we'll see you for the telepathy tapes conversation a bit later. And yeah, go enjoy your day. And yeah, prayers to Malibu and California. I'm not getting any updates on what's happening down there, but I'm sending you guys so much love. I'm glad you were able to make it today from your house.
Thank you so much, everyone. This was really fun. Thanks for having me, Danielle.
Yay. Thank you. Okay, we'll see you guys later.
Okay, bye.
Bye.